Welcome back, everybody, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, where we try to crack the code on growing your business by tackling the challenges that keep revenue leaders up at night. I'm Carl Ortmans, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into the topic of launching into emerging markets. Now, today's podcast is sponsored by Virtual Causeway. The problem that many companies are trying to solve today is this: your website visitors are down and your lead flowing, it's declining. Traditional demand gen, it's pretty well outdated. Oh, and AIs and LLMs are now bringing new opportunities and risks like autonomous learning about your brand, even without engagement. Virtual Causeway helps you flip the script. They don't just generate leads, they create conversations with pre qualified buyers who are ready to engage. Whether you're breaking into new markets, booking events, or building quality pipelines, Virtual Causeway acts as an extension to your team to drive real and meaningful interactions. To learn more about Virtual Causeway, visit virtualcauseway.com and mention the show for a special rate. Now, my guest today is pretty fun because my guest is Mike Simmons. So Mike and I got introduced through a common friend, Jay Minash, who actually the two of them spent time together at the Pavilion event in Washington, D.C. And while they were there, Jay messaged me and goes, Carl, I've got your next podcast guest, and you two are going to become best friends. Mike is a seasoned coach. He's a leader with over 22 years of experience in high growth tech companies. Today, he's helping business leaders find clarity to help them stop second guessing and fearlessly take the next logical step with their business. He's been with companies from UPS to Intel and even MIT. He's worked with the industry giants and early stage startups across the board. Mike and I have had the opportunity to have one 25-minute conversation that went 55 minutes long, so you can do the math. And I'm really excited to talk with him today. So welcome to the podcast, Mike, and thank you so much for joining us.
Carl, there are a lot of people who are laughing because they know that that's usually what ends up happening is those conversations either end up going long or they end up being very short. It's never in between.
Well, it's just became so topical. It was the question back, and it was so engaging. It was a lot of fun. So, if we can, let's kick off and ask you a little bit about the context of your world. So, if you could share with the audience, like what industries or verticals do you work in today? What are the selling motions? What size companies do you work with?
Yeah, right now we're kind of going through a little bit of a pivot inside the business. So the marketers out there would say, talk about who you want to be with instead of who you're working with right now. The reality is we've worked all across. So you mentioned a number of the enterprise accounts that I'd work with, both on the sales side and also inside the organization, inside Catalyst. I'm working on going up market and getting back into enterprise, delivering my capabilities. So boutique consulting, coaching, speaking, and training into large Fortune 500 organizations, specifically to help solve the leadership challenge in the context of communication. Historically, though, I've worked at United Parcel Service for a number of years. That's where I cut my teeth in management. Got into emerging and enablement tech at a company called SmartForce. That when I was in an event speaking a couple of weeks ago, I asked how many people in the room remember SmartForce, and nobody in the room remembered that company, which made me feel very, very old. So we were acquired by Skillsoft. More people would know that company in the space. I like the emerging and enablement technology because I'm driven to help people do the things they want to do better and faster, which really gets into this whole problem solving challenge that we have. The world has a lot of problems. We don't need to manufacture new problems for people. We just need to help people solve the existing problems. And I've seen it work very well, both in emerging and enablement technology. One, because I like that. I like trying new things, testing new things, and then figuring out new applications for it. Specifically in the go-to-market side, helping organizations think different, do different, and be different when it comes to where they're going, which makes that a really good fit. But surprisingly, my last couple of clients that I've worked with have come from non-tech space. So we're manufacturing, distribution. So the stuff where we're actually building things and people are putting their hands on things and you can see it inside the community. So there's this really weird kind of angle where it's like a reverse bell curve of the emerging and enablement tech, and then the building brick and mortar in the community type stuff. And I found a very interesting amount of success on both sides of that.
Interesting. Now there's I mean, there's lots of questions as part of that, but as you get into some of those bigger brick and mortar companies, you got people that are typically staying for longer versus tech companies a higher turnover rate. So maybe there's a correlation there between I want to go really fast, but I don't have the time to really coach somebody to be great on the emerging side. And on the flip side, it's like you've heard my voice for a long time. Let's bring another voice in to give you another perspective. I don't know. I don't know if those two connect, but that's where my mind immediately goes.
Well, we talked about hockey, and like a speed to impact is more important than going fast.
Hmm.
Right? Like if you're gonna separate somebody from a puck, you need to make impact. Or if you're gonna take a shot, you need to make impact. You're gonna change something. You're gonna change direction of the puck. You're gonna change direction of the person. Speed to impact is more important than going fast. And I think too many people are actually over focused on going fast. And what they find out is they wake up one day and they're like, where can we curse and swear on this thing?
Absolutely.
Where the fuck am I? Like, how have I gotten here? Like, I've just gone around in circles. I worked with someone a number of years ago, and it's part of the reason why I'm not employable. Her claim to fame inside the organization was that she turned the organization around 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like turned over, like brought in a new group that didn't work. I'm going to bring in another group that didn't work. Bring in another group that didn't work, or they transformed the company.
When I think about turning around, I'm thinking we're going in one direction. We turn around 180 degrees, we go to the other direction. Then we turn around 180 degrees and go the other direction. Like those are that is there's a pardon me. There's a thing that happened from a leadership perspective where it felt like, hey, I'm the one who's taking this all on board. I'm moving it, and this is the way we're going to go. And oh, now this isn't working. So now this is the way that we're going to go, and it's all on me. And the mistake that I think she made on that side was, number one, you shouldn't be turning the organization around 3 times. If you're doing that, you may be the problem. You should be helping your team adjust and iterate as they move forward so that you can move forward and stop turning around. So I think it's more important to accelerate speed to impact than go fast.
I like that. Speed to impact is more important than going fast. I haven't heard somebody say that yet to me in that respect. And it also makes me think of let's go fast and break things, but then there's the same time of like, what's the speed? How quickly can we create an impact based on this change? So interesting, different ways of considering it. So speaking of speed and impact and that, let's sort of segue. It actually worked out pretty well. When the topic, as people probably have heard, as I like to ask the question, and the question is, what's a successful revenue initiative you've led, or the most challenging initiative you're trying to solve or have solved? And you pretty quickly and easily said it's launching into emerging markets. And so my first question on this topic is going to be this one. It's an area I'm really excited to talk to you about, because as companies grow, they have to test what's next. And so that speed to impact and going fast does correlate. And I think the question, if I can ask it this way, how come this is such a difficult challenge for companies to solve?
It's Barry Diller talks about it in the context of infinite learning and the beginner's mind. It's very hard to look at things with a beginner's mind. We have so much bias as we go in. We have this view of how things should work or how things will work. So we go in with that approach and we create very big blind spots. We lose perspective and dig deep ruts trying to do something the way that it should work rather than figure out the way that it will work inside that market. And sometimes the markets are going to be a little bit different. Those things can be a different perspective of the challenge that exists out there. It could be different engagement that you have to have with the people, different ways that people engage with each other. The reality is, at least today, and we're recording this in 2025, the machines have not yet taken over. So we're still in this situation where we're in this human to human interaction. And if you stay focused on first principles, you take a beginner's mind approach, you ask a lot of questions to help shift perspective, you'll start to reveal the right path rather than guess on what you think that path should be. Helpful
So
or too fluffy?
no, it's good. And it brings me to a question of when we talk about emerging markets, are we
Yep.
talking like when you think of that, because I have two different thoughts.
Yeah.
For emerging markets, are these we're going to go into a new country as an example, or there's a new market or segment, one that's popped up pretty recently is like the gaming industry. And I
Mhm.
say gaming, like gambling, right? Like, so you think of like FanDuel and those have really popped up and they've grown. So there's a new vertical or new
Yeah.
market. How do you think of emerging markets?
Yeah. So I think of it in both of those ways. One way to look at it is geography.
Okay.
And being here in the States, I, I used to think this was the center of the world. So you're like, okay, when we're talking about emerging markets, we're talking about going out of the US and into another area. And I've been fortunate enough to help our organization back in the WT days go into Brazil, move into other segments of academic, for profit versus not for profit, traditional academic, move into different countries. And the cool part about doing that is you're building from 0 to 1. You have this opportunity to go and create something. So that's one, going out into geographies. The other one is looking at the thing that you do really, really well and thinking about another application for that thing in a new market, a market that you might not have worked with previously, a different application. There was a time not that long ago where there was so much energy and attention put on these matchmaking network services. So whether you're talking about like a Tinder or a Bumble or whatever kind of service that's out there. Growth Match was one that I had worked with on the B2B side of things. The Ultimately, what we're trying to do in each of those instances is you're trying to connect a human with another human who has either a similar set of interests or has a specific problem that needs to be solved, and you're trying to connect them with the human who has the similar level of interest or a similar or a solution to that specific problem. We start to apply that technology into different environments. You mentioned gaming earlier, and I know you're talking more about the casino type stuff, but if I remember right, Slack started as a communication platform inside a gaming platform. That was the original thing. That we're going to help with communication there. And then ultimately it turned into a much different market where we were talking about corporate communication. Somebody can fact check us on that, but I'm pretty certain that's the background there. And I don't have deep insight into that side of things. But there are many times where something gets invented and the users actually have a vote and use it in a different way.
Interesting. Yeah, and so that it does bring the question, because actually I was talking with Doug Landis on on one of our podcast episodes, and we were talking about pricing and packaging. And
Okay.
this topic came up specifically because it was like, you know what? All of a sudden, we talked to a company that we didn't actually think that was going to be pinpoint to RCP, but turns out we have something to offer them that they didn't consider and we didn't consider either.
Yeah.
And so I maybe my question to from that context is, when I'm trying to break into those markets, how should I be thinking about it? And I'll maybe add a little bit of context to this. Do I just go, you know what? I'm going to take my best account executive and a couple of business development reps, and I'm going to put them into a new market because you know what? They'll figure it out and they'll help me with it. Do I take a different approach and say, you know what? We're going to try to test some events. We're going to have a marketing do this. Maybe we're going to take the product marketing team and say, can you do a deep dive into this market and see, does it fit? What are how should people or companies be thinking about this so they try to avoid this mistake? Because I think there's a lot here that are mistakes that just from the outset.
Yeah. Well, let me first start with what you should not do. Like,
Okay.
here's the one thing that you shouldn't do. Go ahead and announce at your sales kickoff that we're going to go after this new market. And now we're going to go ahead and spiff everybody on the team, or set up some kind of incentive around your compensation plan to have everybody distracted going out and testing the market. All that will do is distract the fuck out of your team. Like, that's what you should not do. So don't do that. You've got to keep the business running. And if you know your people inside your organization, you'll know some of the people who like to build, the innovators, the testers, the early adopters, the people who are ahead of the curve when it comes to trying and doing new things. Find them first, figure out what they're interested in, and then test with them about their interest in testing in that market. If they're interested in testing in the market, then yes, they can apply their skills inside that market to get a better understanding of the feasibility of the market. And people don't like when I use words like market feasibility assessment or market feasibility testing, because somebody on the leadership side inside that organization or somebody on the board or whoever has already said the market is feasible. So how are you going to come out in as an external resource and actually do feasibility testing, or even an internal resource and do feasibility testing? Feasibility testing is simply an experiment. That's awesome that you've made the assumption that this is going to work and that you know exactly how to do it. And you haven't sold for however many years, but you get a captive audience and can have an awesome set of conversations where everybody's nodding their head and nobody's saying no to you because you're the leader in the business. What the fuck are you doing? Like, this is what we do, is we break things down into small pieces. We identify the people who are interested in building that 0 to 1 piece and then deploy them into the area to start testing. There's this cool thing that we've forgotten about. It's called the scientific method. Let's have a hypothesis. Let's go out and test that hypothesis. Let's work our process, gather the data, remove assumptions as we're going through it, and then take that information to determine, are we moving on? Are the things that we expected to happen true? If so, let's keep going. If something different, do we want to adjust, or have we kind of determined that maybe that wasn't the best area to put time, energy, and attention? To get back to the question, because we kind of bounced around a little bit there around, what not to do and then how to do it. Ultimately, I like the idea of taking small teams that are very, very focused, who have a process and are extremely comfortable with working the process to learn and gather data so that that information can be provided as feedback back into the organization.
I really like that idea. I've used the term Delta Squad as an example. Like, you just put a small team together and say, here, we're going to do this. And there's also a couple of things that you mentioned that I'd like to maybe connect here.
Sure.
I like the notion that you said is don't just spiff everybody, because what happens, it's sort of like the business development pendulum, right? So if you're an account executive and you do a ton of prospecting, and maybe this is from back in the day, and sort of use the pendulum, I do a lot of prospecting. All of a sudden I'm doing all prospecting. And then what happens? Oh, I get a bunch of meetings and now my pipeline grows. And then where it goes, the other way. And now I'm just working the pipeline and I forget about the prospecting. I've seen it happen in a similar way with spiffs. Oh, we want to launch into, distribution as an example, or manufacturing. You said manufacturing. Oh, we're going to launch into manufacturing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. How? For what? What do we tell them? Is the product ready? Oh, but hey, we created a whole bunch of meetings. We spent all this money on our account executives to produce these meetings, and then they went nowhere. Then what happens? Account executives get upset because, well, look, I was working on the things you asked me to. I missed my quota. I've never missed my quota. I didn't make money on that. I shared all the feedback, and now we're not doing it. There's a bit of that frustration, right? So there can be frustration. So tying that from, instead of spiffs, and doing it in a logical format and going into a vertical, like you said, you said, like, find the innovators inside the org. Do you advise companies to say, if you're going to innovate and you're going to find those people, do you give them the advice of reduce their quota? Do you give them a bit of quota relief? Do you give them, hey, look, if they get this meeting, triple their commissions on this? What are some of the pieces of feedback you give a company to say, if you're going to do this, here's the smart way to do it?
Yeah. So breaking it down and looking at comp plans as an example and saying, hey, how are we going to compensate our folks for doing this? Let's understand what the job to be done of a comp plan is. The job to be done, my perspective, is fairly compensate the person, the individual, for doing the work that we expect them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Fairly compensate them for doing the work that we expect them to do. And depending on how much leverage either side takes on, there should be significant upside for either side. So if you're a 50-50 rep and 50% base and 50% variable, when you break through your number, there should be significant upside on that side. You hit into those accelerators. If, on the other hand, you're a 90-10 rep and 90% of your base is, or 90% of your OTE on target earning is base and 10% is variable, your upside is going to be a bit more limited. So know where the leverage points are. In this instance, look at it and say, what are the behaviors I'm looking for? What are the objectives that I'm working toward? What are the assumptions that I'm making? And how do I want to make sure that I keep people whole for the work that they're doing? If someone is tip of the spear, front of the line, going out there and putting everything out there to go test inside a new market, you're going to have to over-resource them so that you can help them keep focused, so that they don't slide back into doing the stuff that they were already doing. Like maybe, I think one of the mistakes that people do in this instance is they try to have people be half pregnant, which doesn't work. Like you've got someone who carries their, maybe they still carry that territory, and then they're doing this emerging market thing someplace else. The question's got to be asked, why are you having them continue to hold on to a territory? And I've had people do that. Like I've had people hold on to both and be in both areas. And for me, I found some of my best years when I had three numbers. I'd have a team number, I'd have a market number, and then I'd have an individual number. And those numbers, even though I may not have hit on all three of them, I hit on one of them, and it was really good, and it was a really good year, and we're going on a good trip, and we're doing all of those things. So know what the job to be done of the comp plan is, and then design it effectively to do it. If you're going to invest in a specific area, what I would recommend is, rather than taking that investment and spreading out across everything and hoping one of those things hits, keep it very focused and focus on that team. And you could do kind of a Delta squad type team. The key is make sure that the people in that group understand the job to be done of their specific role. And if we agree that market feasibility is the first step, meaning we have to assess whether or not the market is ready for this product in this area, how they're thinking about the problem, who is involved in it. These basic questions like what problem, who has it, who's impacted, who cares about the people who have or impacted, why does it persist in the market, why is it important to solve on their side. When we go through those things and we gather the information from the market, then we can start to make some guesses on where we want to invest a little bit further. My process is minimum of 10 conversations with people in that market. If I have 10 conversations with the people that we're thinking we should be talking to inside that market, 10 within individual roles. So if you've got 3 different roles that you're testing, now we're talking about 30 conversations. If you have 3 different roles across 3 different markets that you're testing, you start to increase. Now we're up to 90 different conversations. But over those conversations, we should gather enough information where we start to say, you know what, we're landing in this area, we're not landing in that area. And that should inform, do we invest further? Not, well, keep working the plan because this is what we said we were going to do. So everybody keep going forward.
Yeah. So now the question goes, who should be involved in it? Because the feasibility is the thing that I really like you talk about, because now you've got 90 potential different people. You'd have those 10 conversations. What's the work that needs to be done? Or like, I know you said the jobs to be done as part of the comp plan, but on that same thread, what is the work that needs to be done ahead of time in order to say, yes, we're going to go there? And who should be involved in building that out?
It's heavily dependent on the structure of your organization. I get bored quickly. So going after emerging markets is a really interesting thing for me. The eye-opening thing, hitting on that geography piece, for me was when I started looking at the US as an emerging market for all of the other countries and people and companies that are out there. So you want to find the person who is innovative, creative, thinks different, wants to do different. They're going to be different. They're going to do all of that kind of work. And they've got the skill set to be able to have those conversations with a human being. Because if you put somebody in front of another human being and they don't know how to have the conversation, what you're going to run into is a lot of head nodding on the other end where people are agreeing with you, and you're not doing discovery at that point in time. You're trying to validate a perspective. And here's the thing: the first time you have a conversation with someone that you want to validate a perspective with, they probably don't know you. They may not want to disappoint you. They're gonna. It's easier for them to say yes and nod their head through those things and then go on. When you have a more detailed discovery discussion with that person around how do they think about the problem? What are they doing today to solve the problem? What would they like to do differently? Go deep into some of these questions. And then the question I like to ask at the end is, we're pretty close to the end, is, do you have any questions for me? The reason I ask, do you have any questions for me, or what questions you have for me, depending on tone and depending on the person I'm meeting with and what their seniority is and how the conversation goes, is if they don't have any questions, that's a really good data point that whatever the, I've cursed way too much already, but whatever the fuck it is that you're trying to test for feasibility probably didn't land. There's something that didn't land in that instance because they didn't lead you forward. They didn't ask for more. They didn't say, the thing I like to hear in this instance is, what, this sounds pretty interesting. Why are you doing it?
Right.
Because I didn't give them any context. I didn't say, hey, we're in the process of going to market in a certain area and want to do, but no, I'm just asking, I'm saying, hey, we're doing a feasibility assessment. I've got some questions around this specific topic. Can I get some time with you? And typically people who are experts in that area will share that time because they like to share their expertise. They like to share their experience, and other humans like to help humans. They don't like to help humans if you feel like you're just kind of taking and taking and taking. So I'm going through this process right now from a market feasibility perspective on an updated version of a product that we're putting out in the market. And we're struggling with some of the language, but I'm going through the same process. It is taking stuff that I've done already and applying it in a different context, pardon me, inside the market. The key piece is making sure that you ask those questions. And for me, they are the same questions. I don't script them, but they're the same flow. And I work around this hexagon framework. Like, what's your view on the problem? What's your perspective? Usually on that side, I focus on why it persists, like why it continues to happen. And then who are all the people that are impacted by it? But you ask better questions, you get better answers.
I totally agree with you on that one. And so now as you're going into and you're having the conversations, what is the prep that goes into it? So I'll give you sort of a little bit of context, and maybe you want to take a drink because I know you're talking for a little while. Do we have somebody that looks at, hey, I'm going to look at a market and I want to see, what's my TAM, my SAM, my SOM, my total addressable market, my obtainable market, my saleable market? Is that a question? Is that something that is done ahead of time, or do you start to look and say, the CAGR or the cumulative, the compound annual growth rate of this industry is right for us? And by the way, our product, we've seen these types of customers that are using it, and it's not a use case we want to look. What are the components that you would suggest somebody to look into first to go, good idea, bad idea?
Yeah. So I don't think that's a sales rep or sales professional's role in doing this. What you're doing is you're pointing the person who's having the conversations in that direction. Pardon me. So somebody has a hypothesis based on whatever data that came up from up on high that says, hey, we're seeing some interesting things in the way the product is being used, or we're seeing some interesting things around what people are talking about in the market. Somebody goes through the process on that side and they say, okay, given what we know about the TAM, we believe that there's an opportunity here. And if we can get 1% of this market over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, given what we've seen growth wise, it can completely change the trajectory of our business. So there's some work that gets done on the front end before you bring somebody else in to go through and start doing that test. Because when you bring somebody in to do the test, they have to be very targeted, like very specific on who is it that we're going to be targeting. What kind of information do we want to get out of that? How are we going to communicate the information back into the business? So this is that all of that work that you were talking about before that'll typically happen. And then the organization comes out at a sales kickoff and they're like, hey, we're really excited about this thing. We're doing this. We want everybody to do it. I'm saying hit the piece in the middle, take that data that you pulled together, use the professionals inside your organization, the people on the marketing side, the people, from on the investment on the board side, whoever is going through and saying, hey, this is the thing we want to test, get some of that data and then use that data to determine, does it make sense for me to deploy a resource toward it? Because if I deploy that resource, it's going to cost me a lot of money. I'm going to take them away from doing something that I know they've already been able to do very well. So I think that happens first, and it's not typically the person who's having the conversations with the customer. One of the reasons why it's important to not have that same person do it, if you have all of the background data, how do you go in with a beginner's mind?
And it also, you were talking about this before, and I should have mentioned it, but it's sort of like passing the mom test. Have you ever heard of the mom test? There's a book.
I have, but I don't remember the details behind it. Is it a bunch of questions behind it to get to it?
No, the mom test is like, if I was to say, like, if you would go to your mom and be like, hey, mom, I want to do this thing because I think this. What's a mom going to be like? Yeah, that's really good. You should do that. They're supportive versus you get into an audience and you say, hey, look, Mike, there's a market that I'll just sort of like role play this as an example. Mike, you're an expert in the manufacturing field and I've been watching your work. You're somebody that I trust. We don't know well. I want to learn more about your world because it's a bit of a feasibility test. Would you be open to having a conversation with me just to answer some questions? Just want to learn from you. Okay. Having that is different than going to your mom, because your mom or your family or your friends, some of your friends might be like, look, that's a bad idea. Don't do this. Most times it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, go ahead. I'll support you. Like, it's a sort of a, I don't want to say like as a kid, you pat them on the butt. Hey, good job, and send them on their way.
Right.
So I guess I'm asking you, what I'm trying to get the question out, and I shared a bit of context, is when you go to that person, you ask them for their input, they're trusted in the market, you're going to go to launch it, they give you the feedback, and then you take that feedback from Mike. We talked about the manufacturing world. You explained to me, I take all the information. What do I do with it? Who do I work with?
Yeah. So the big piece is it's never one point of data, because if it's one data point, you don't really have a lot of information there. You're not able to identify some trends. You're not able to identify patterns, and there's a high amount of risk. So that's why for me, it's 10. In that group of 10, I should be able to identify some patterns, some things that we want to test and do next. And all of that gets shared back with the organization saying, hey, we maybe have something here. It may look a little bit different than what we thought it was going to, but here's the language that the market is using. One of the other things I do when I'm doing this is I don't give people the context. Like I say, I've intentionally not given you any background information because I don't want to inform you on what we're doing here. Like I'm doing research. It's basically what it is. It's research. I'm trying to figure out the story here. Like, what's the thing that happens? Once I've got that story, then I take all of the different stories that I have, like brush strokes on a painting, throw them up on the painting. And I don't know if the painting is going to be an 8 by 10, 8 inches by 10 inches, 8 by 10, 8 feet by 10 feet, 80 by 100. Like, I don't know how big the painting is going to be. But as I get those brush strokes up there should be some things that we learn. And those things can be, people are interested in it and nobody's solving it right now because they just don't know how. People are interested in it. People are solving it for it this way. And they're really happy with the way things are going. No, nobody's interested in it. They're not even thinking about it. It's not even on their radar. And this is probably the direction we don't want to go. But all of that data gets collected. And by having it be collected by a person, a single person, then you now aren't going to have the data skewed by multiple people going out and trying to do a test in a way that's a little bit different than everybody else. You can set up some standards in the way that you want to test. Again, remember, you're dealing with humans, and as you add new variables, you create complexity, and that adds in additional risk. But that information comes back to the team, whoever the team is who said, hey, we want to invest in this, we want to test it, and then you share it. And then from there, then the team ultimately makes the recommendation around what ends up happening next, not the person who is going out there and getting the information, because the person's just gathering the information so that the other folks can be informed based on the decisions that they're making. And it's hard to do, because as you go through it, like, we want to hear, when we hear something good, we're like, ooh, that's kind of good. I want to go deeper into that kind of thing. And I like it. And then, we get guided by it because we like the positive components. This is why being a bit robotic in the approach is really important, because you're just conveying information back into the organization to then help with the next level of decisions that are going to be made.
On the decisions and the feedback, etc. There's a question that is in my mind. It's sort of two-pronged. Maybe it's the same question, but I'm going to direct it to two different ways, because you talked about your moving up market as an example, yourself. So if you're talking to a company and a company says, hey, I want to go into an emerging market, I'm a small business, or I'm an enterprise.
Okay.
Who leads that initiative in both situations and circumstances?
It's highly dependent on the structure of the business and kind of where things are. It could be led by someone on the product team. Like, they're just looking at it and they're saying, hey, there's enough data, enough interesting things where, given what we're seeing here, we think the product could be applied on this side. It could be led by product, meaning the initiative was started by product. It could be led by marketing, because they're looking at different signals that are out there in the marketplace and they think that there's an opportunity. It could be led by the person who sat down next to the CEO at an event and said, you know what, I really think that you could use this product in this area. And now all of a sudden the CEO sees the shiny thing. Is like, we think that this is going to be such a great opportunity because someone said it. Like, there's so many different ways that it could be. I think the key piece is making sure that the person who is leading it has leadership skills and understands what leadership is. And from my perspective, leadership is how we move forward. So they understand what we're moving forward. They also know the biases that they're pulling together. I think the better question on this one might be, why is this person taking the charge? Why has this been put on their shoulders? Do they have the capability and the capacity to be able to do that thing? What bias are they potentially going to bring to it? Because once someone takes the leadership role on that thing, all of a sudden this is their baby, and they are constantly looking for people that, mom to tell them how cute their baby is. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a really tough one. It's tough to just put a specific name on it.
And I think the reason I'm asking the question is because I do think it's hard. There's components of, I want to test into a market because I'm part of the product team. I see all the win-loss opportunities. I'm pulling it into a system.
Yep.
Call whatever system it is that you use. It could be any of the aggregates as the harvesters of the world. And I'm looking at going, there's a trend. Or do I look at it and go, there's a trend here. And a vertical or a focus that we didn't actually talk about, education or manufacturing, or, hey, you know what? We're doing really well in the UK. We've actually didn't really focus on the UK. How come? We start to look at it that way. So there's data points and there's signals from companies that who looks at it and the reason for it. The other thing that I really like is this notion of to say, let's use you and I as the example. You and I are both working in the same company. We're both account executives and we're selling to the markets. But you have, as an example, because you said manufacturing. So you're the manufacturing guy at this one, Mike. You've sold multiple manufacturing deals and you start to understand the lingo, how they talk, etc. and you go, hey, by the way, I'd like to put a push in manufacturing, or can I do a test? And maybe on the flip side, somebody like myself and say, we already talked about the gambling websites, right? Like let's say on the weekends I'm big into sports gambling,
Yep.
but I understand every app, how they work, the things, the cycle. But I go, you know what? There's a market here because I've sold a couple, but I'm super passionate about it. So there's two different approaches to look at it. Like you've taken an approach on a vertical, and I've taken another one, and it could be interest, like you talked about previous in today's. Like, what is it that I have that beginner's mindset of I have curiosity, I have a little bit of interest, but I want to go deeper. And so now I have two completely different verticals that we're going to test. Great. Do we now say so now in the leadership side to say, okay, they're going to take a path here and they're just probably going to book a bunch of meetings. I want to be we have to have somebody else who's part of the meetings, because communication isn't what's said, it's what's heard. Right. And so if we're into a meeting and we're hearing, and sales has happy ears, like, let's call it what it is. There's times like, oh, I heard this thing. I heard them say this, but okay, Carl, that's actually not what they said. It said it like this, because I'm listening for the things that I want to hear. To your point of like, stress test, to have multiple conversations, listen to all the data points. And so I give this sort of backstory and sort of context because I think there's an interesting component of like, I want to take these two different approaches. I'm now to say, okay, if I'm the leader and say, okay, any manufacturing opportunity comes in, I'm going to pass it to Mike, because you know what? Mike's going to become our manufacturing guy. Hey, the opportunities on the gambling side and the sports gambling side, any opportunities or companies that come, I'm going to route them to Carl, because he has that clarity. And then we're going to watch and see what happens. What are the things that they want? What kind of information? What kind of details they're looking for? Hey, how is the product being used? And so there's also a question of who from the product team is looking to go, as much as I want to go into the manufacturing market, Mike, you know what? We're going to have a problem. We're not ISO 27001 certified. We're not going to break into those larger accounts. Or, hey, Mike, the product that you're using, we're going to have to rebuild our entire back end, because they're going to want this level of data in multiple languages to support everything because of that ISO 27000. And we just can't do it. We got to pull out. So then, as I'm asking about the launching into, but even now that we're into it, who's the fact checker to say, good idea, keep going, or pump the brakes, we can't do it, it's going to cost us too much money?
Yeah. So, I mean, this really comes back to how the team communicates in a collaborative environment, where they go through and they make sure that they're asking the right questions in that kind of environment. It's not just taking the information and then saying, okay, let's do what the rep recommends, because the rep is so passionate about what they're hearing and what they're seeing and why they're excited and all of the bias type stuff. So in that kind of instance, I like to report back into the group, say, this is what we're hearing, this is what we're seeing, this is what gets us excited, and this is what we want to go ahead and test next. It's to the point that you made earlier, this is hard stuff, because you can do anything. Like, you literally can, there's no shortage of the number of things that you can go out there and do. The question is, are you doing the right things in the right order to achieve the outcome that you're looking for? So when it comes to the decision, the question I like to ask there is, what is the specific decision we're going to make? What decision? Let's have clarity of definition around what that decision is going to be. It is that will be made. And let's have clarity on the criteria that we're going to use to make the decision. So we have the what, and then we have the how. And if we know our what's and our how's, and we bring the right who's into the room, then we can have an effective conversation and ultimately get to the point where we make a decision. And decision making is very different than problem solving. And often people get them mixed up, or you think you're coming into a decision-making meeting, and ultimately what you're doing is you're working through a problem. And it's so on that side, let's make sure before we go into it, and before we pull all of that data together, and before we are ready to, like, before we pull the team, let's make sure it's really clear. This is a meeting to decide go or no go on this or that. Maybe you don't have resources to be able to do both of them because it's going to stress product to be pulled in two different directions. So we're going to make a decision. We're going to choose one or the other. And in order to come to that decision, we're going to look at this specific criteria. Criteria might be view on market, feedback that we got from the people that we did the interview on, indicators of around whatever it was that we're learning, but have some criteria and then measure each of those against that specific criteria. Now, I get it. You're going to have two different people who are doing the research in either of those areas based on their given level of experience, expertise, and passion associated with it. But if you have the clear criteria around the types of questions and the types of information that we're gathering, then we should be able to look at the two pictures, then observe those two pictures against, or map those two pictures against our what decision and our specific criteria, and then ultimately come together and call the ball on things, which will be hard because if you're only going to do one, you're going to irritate some people. And that's where you've got to get the team to agree. The reason we agreed that going into this, we were only going to do one. And given all of the data that came through, we agreed that this is the right direction to go with, given what we know. And now we're going to invest further in it. Leaders struggle with decision making. They just struggle calling the ball. It's like reps. Reps struggle with decision making when they want to go and get a new job. They're like, well, I'd like to do this kind of work. Well, who do you want to do the work for? What company do you want to join? Well, I don't have a specific company. Well, are you kidding me? Like, let's gain some clarity. So, just different stages. So once we've gathered the information, we've conduct research. We gather data, we conduct research. Then we assess that information. Then we make a decision, an informed decision on what we're going to do. And then we take the next action that follows. We gather data, we assess, we make a decision, and then we take action. And then ultimately after that, it's pretty cool. Once you take action, you're going to get more data. So you gather more data, you assess that data, you make the next decision, and you take action. And this is basically John Boyd's OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act.
I like what you said there because I don't know if there's the Diary of a CEO is something that I've been listening and watching a little bit more. And they just had this one the other day, and it was the leaders struggle to make decisions because their cognitive load is overflowing all the time. Yeah. They walk into a meeting, like you said, am I making a decision here? Am I giving input? What's my role here? And I think that is something that needs to be addressed as you go into it and you decide who's taking on what role. And as you continue on the path here, I think the other natural question I'd like to ask you is, how long should I allow this experiment to go on for?
This is not going to be helpful. It's really, it's not time-based. It's data-based. So as long as you need to get the data that you agreed that you needed to get, but no longer than that. So if you agree that you need to have 10 conversations and you can get those 10 conversations in the first week, you did what you said you were going to do, go in and move that along. It doesn't need to be a 90-day or 6-month or 12th of never type discussion. Like, have the data points, have the pieces of information that you want to check off your list, go get that and then report back. It's too hard. It's hard when you're working with other people to put appropriate timelines on things, especially with other people outside of your organization. Inside your organization, you've got a little bit more control. You can kind of control and influence calendars a little bit better. Outside of the organization, it's much more difficult. Everybody has other priorities, things that they're working on. So it might take you a little bit longer than necessary. Make sure you hit your marks. Like what's the amount of information I want to collect before I'm ready to make a decision, not how much time do I want to do it. You can do it really fast. You can do it inside a sprint. If you've got a really good network and access to people and people who have access to other people who can help make those conversations happen, you can make this all happen really quick. We're talking about 10 conversations. If you don't have that access and you have to start at the beginning and you're going to wait on opportunities to come in, that could take a heck of a lot of time depending on time, energy, and attention that you're putting into it. And if your approach to getting those things to come in is by doing ad spend to promote the things, remember you're now adding a variable into your experiment that is maybe different than what you want to have as part of the business as you go forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to consider. And I like how you said it is either, is it based on meetings or is it based on opportunities? Because there's two different things. One's a learning and one's a financial. And the both are important, but it also helps you determine whether or not this is a good path for you to take or not. So I guess as I heard you say it is
Yeah.
determine whether or not you're going to give a time for this to happen and determine your metric. It's number of conversations, number of data points, or in order for me to show that this is a success, I need to show 30 closed opportunities in the next 60 days. Well, if that's your time, better have a short sales cycle, because 60 days is a really short period of time to try to break into a new market, because there's an impatience component that happens with many founders and senior leaders to go, well, why aren't we going faster? This is a no-brainer. Like, just call these people. And so I think there's a time component that comes into play, and I like how you said it. So
yeah,
I just realized
the opportunity piece is really, really hard. And if anybody is using that as a measure of your first part of the go-to-market piece, you're looking at the wrong stuff. You've left too many things that are out of, like, what happens if the people that you're targeting in this instance happen to work on a state calendar, and now their state calendar, their end of their fiscal year was at the end of June. So their new fiscal year is already started in July, and you've set up a target to get this business in the next 60 days. And now they've got to create budget in that kind of environment. Or let's just say that they're on a federal cycle and it's September, October, time period. And right now we're in October. It's October 22nd. We missed the boat. So there's so many different variables that come into play. And I think the piece that I'd like everybody to walk away from it here, just to kind of pull it into a single point: create an experiment, run the experiment, evaluate what happened as a result of that experiment, and then decide what you want to experiment on next. And if there's so much stuff that happens in your business that ultimately gets to money, if you're going to base it on money, you're going to extend out the amount of time that experiment is going to be out there. And if you're extending out the time, you're probably going to create more distraction across the team, because some of those folks are probably going to be, if they're still carrying their other number, they may be more focused on that. So have an experiment, go out there, test the experiment, iterate and adjust, and move forward. That way you'll accelerate speed to impact rather than just go fast from thing to thing to thing.
Yeah, I like how you said that, and just realizing we're more than 50 minutes already, and it didn't feel like that at all. So let's try to get wrapped up here so you can go and do the rest of your day. As I like to say, everybody likes new and nobody likes different. And when you do both at the same time, it can cause either friction or uncertainty. So for companies that are thinking about launching to emerging markets and they realize, you know what, I want to make a change or I want to do this, what are 2 or 3 actionable things for them to do on a Monday morning?
Define like why you want to do it. And, I mean, and you can go through like, why could be because you're solving a specific problem. Well, then work through your root cause analysis to figure out why the problem continues to persist. And then ultimately whether or not it's important to solve it. Let's figure out the why piece. If you've already gone through the decision of, hey, I want to go out there and test this. So make sure the why is really clear. Then the next piece is identify the who's that you're going to use to gather the information effectively that are outside of your organization, not part of your friend group. Because friends are going to be like your mom. I mean, like, good job, and depending on what your friend group is and how important sarcasm is to that friend group, but you're gonna get people who are gonna root you on and cheer you on that side. Go outside of the network. It's one of the biggest challenges with people with operate founders in a founder-led sales motion, they think, well, if I could just bring people in to do it the way that I do it, would be great. Well, but part of the way you're doing it is you've got a network of people who happen to be in those roles and they want to see you be successful. And that's very different than the SDR that you bring in to start doing that kind of stuff. So let's do the why first and then the who, and then you can start to get into the how piece. Why, who, how. That's only based on the idea that you've already established what your what is.
Yeah, nice. I think that's a great way to leave it. Mike, before we go, if people say, hey, you know what, I really like to listen to Mike and I want to learn more, I want to talk to him more, where would you suggest people to connect with you?
I have worked really hard to simplify this, and it's taken me years to do it. You can find your catalyst at findmycatalyst.com. That is the best place to go. You'll get all the links to any other place that you want to get access to. It's a content experience that we're creating, and you'll see content in the context of leadership, how we move forward, culture, how we do what we do, revenue, how we fund the ability to do what we do, and execution, how we achieve results.
Amazing. Mike is, if you can't tell just through the conversation, he's incredibly genuine. He's excited about what he does. He posts a lot of content for you that are actionable things. I was telling him, hey, I've been catching up on his YouTube channel, his LinkedIn shorts, etc. So really appreciate you doing this today, Mike, and joining us, because it's been a lot of fun. And like you say, it's almost been an hour and it didn't feel like it at all. So that wraps up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers. I want to thank Mike for sharing these incredibly invaluable insights today. They're strategies that you can put into action tomorrow. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Until next time, this is Carl with Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn obstacles into opportunities. Thank you for investing your time with us today, and see you on the next episode.